Well, outgoing Toronto Police Chief Bill Blair is entering the political fray. He's announced he's seeking the Liberal nomination in his home riding for the next federal election. The 61-year-old was born and raised in Toronto. And Bill Blair joins me now in studio, and this is your first live national television interview. And so since you've made the announcement, I've got to say it's different to see you out of your uniform.
It's a little different to be out of uniform. I spent 39 years wearing that uniform. In the last 10, I rarely had it off.
Yeah, and you know, you just finished work on Friday, and I believe you just cleared your office out yesterday, and today, here you are. This is a really quick turnaround. Well, what made you decide to make this announcement today?
It might have been nice to take a few days off, but I'm not a day off guy. I've been sort of working full out for a very long time. And as well, there's been a great deal of speculation on what I might do next. And the people of Scarborough Southwest, I think, have been very patient with me. And I felt a strong obligation that I had to fulfill my responsibility to the people of Toronto and to continue to serve as their chief right up until the last minute of the last day, and I did that. And then having finished that, it's time to step on and find a new way to try to serve the people of this city, and I've made my choice, and I'm saying that publicly today.
All right, I want to talk about your riding in a moment, but let's go back to that choice, because I understand you were courted, we know at least, well, obviously by the Liberals, the Conservatives, at times we've even heard the NDP, but how did you decide to go with the Liberals? Because I think a lot of people associate the law and order agenda. I think the Conservatives always try to own that agenda, and not to mention your predecessor, Julian Fantino, is also a Conservative MP. So why the Liberals?
Well, for me, it was about values, and I looked very carefully at what party and what leader espoused the values that I felt were important. And I've been the chief in Toronto for a long time. It's an incredibly diverse city, people from all over the world. And I really think that the secret to our safety and the secret to our livability, and the thing I admire and covet the most about being a Torontonian, being a Canadian, is our inclusiveness, that sense of cohesion that we have, and the way in which we embrace each other in our diversity and in our pluralism. And frankly, Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals put forward values that I felt most closely aligned with. And I will tell you, it was a difficult choice. I have great respect for people who serve in every party and in every capacity. You know, there are some really great, dedicated Canadians out there doing what they believe is right. But I felt if I was going to continue to serve and serve in that capacity, I had to align myself with people whose values most closely aligned with mine. And quite frankly, I think over the past 39 years, and certainly for the last 10, I've established my own law and order bona fides. I've done my very best to make Toronto a safe and livable city, and I've worked in communities across Ontario and across Canada, and even around the world. And I think I still have something to contribute and to that national discourse. And I think public policy on safety, on security, and in particular on social justice should be based on evidence and respectful of everyone's lived experience.
There's a lot in there, but one of the things I want to ask you about that Justin Trudeau has made no secret of is the legalization of marijuana. Yeah. As the outgoing chief of Toronto Police, how do you feel about legalizing marijuana?
You know, interestingly enough, I spent a lot of my life dealing with the marijuana issue, and I worked undercover for a number of years in the city of Toronto. I was responsible for drug enforcement for several years as well. But I have seen that merely criminalizing marijuana has not made us successful in keeping it out of the hands of kids. It hasn't kept organized crime out of the business, and it hasn't reduced the violence and the victimization that is so often associated to the illegal marijuana trade. I think we can do better, and I think through regulation, through legalization and regulation, coupled with a strong public health response, I think we can do better for Canadians and better for society. And for example, I think if we regulate marijuana, the decision whether or not to sell to a young person isn't going to be made by some gangster in a stairwell. It'll be made by a government employee based on strong regulations that have been well articulated. And we'll be able to, I think, do a much better job of keeping drugs out of the hands of young people. I think through regulation we can do a better job of keeping organized crime's filthy hands off it and to reduce the violence and the victimization. I think we can make it fairer, because so much of the drug enforcement that does take place across this country, unfortunately, more disproportionately affects minority communities and Aboriginal communities, poor communities, than it does. And so our sense of fairness, I think, needs to really come into play. And as well, I think we need to make sure that we give law enforcement the tools to deal with impaired driving, some of the social disorder, and invest some of the money that can be raised through taxes on that in a public health response, because there are significant public health issues related to the use of marijuana.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about the riding that you're running in, which is your community. And as you mentioned...
Well, let me be really clear. I've lived in Scarborough my whole life. Actually, my wife lived in Scarborough Southwest, but I've worked and served that community for the past 4 decades.
Right. But I want to mention that community, and as strong as I'm sure it is, also has higher than average unemployment and higher than average working poor. So what do you feel is missing there that you can bring?
Well, I think we have an obligation to work hard for people who aspire to be in the middle class, to make investments in those communities. I also see the difference. And as a public servant and responsible for public safety, I've seen that you can't arrest your way out of some of the difficult social challenges and experiences the communities face. You got to make some investments. You got to create opportunities for their kids. You got to make investments in transit and infrastructure and employment, and we can do better. And you've got to create and maintain and support an inclusive society that offers the support to those who need it, to make sure that everybody feels included.
Yeah. I feel like it's very clear that you're bringing a lot to the table, given your experience, in the police force and as chief. But you'll also have to answer for some of the decisions that you made as chief. And when it comes to the G20, the Rob Ford investigation, how do you plan on preparing for those questions? I'll ask it to you right now.
Absolutely. I tell you, I prepared for that my whole life. Every decision that I made as a police chief was based on what I believed was in the public interest, what was required of the police by the rule of law. I have tried to maintain the integrity of that office, and I have always tried to do what I believed was in the best interest of the people of Toronto and the safety of our city. And I understand that one of the things that comes with a job like that is inevitably some people won't be happy with the decision you made. But if you've done the right thing and you've done what you honestly believe is your best, and I have, then I'm quite comfortable answering the people's questions. And sometimes when difficult situations arose, one of my responsibilities was to stand up in front of the City of Toronto and explain what had happened and to reassure them that we were going to do the right thing. And I've been doing that for a very long time, and I'll be happy to continue to answer their questions, because that has been my job, and I think it continues to be my responsibility.
So let me ask you, what do you feel that moving from the chief of police into this role, which is quite varied, what do you need to work on as you go into the political realm? Because you still have to win the nomination.
What? The most important part of this right now, and let's be really clear, I'm only seeking the nomination. There's a lot of really good people who have already put their names forward, and they care about their communities, and they know a lot about their communities, and I need to talk to them, and I need we need to come, I think, to through this process together, because at the end, we all have to be standing together. And I think that's really important, so that we can continue to serve the people of our community and to do a good job for them. I've got a lot to learn. My lived experience overwhelmingly, certainly I've been a resident and a citizen of Scarborough. I care very much about that community, but I've looked through the lens of the guy responsible for its safety. And the safety of our communities and upholding the rule of law in our communities is important, but there's a lot of other issues. Now, I haven't done that in isolation. I've done that in partnership with a lot of good people in our city.
Well, let me ask you just quickly, what do you think the biggest issues will be in this upcoming election?
I think the quality of people's lives. And the quality of people's lives really speaks to our ability to maintain prosperous communities, to create opportunities for young people, to create real employment, meaningful employment, rewarding employment. People aspire to raise, and that's been my experience everywhere in the city, no matter where you come from, what language you speak, what faith tradition you may hold. Everybody wants to create prosperity for their families. They want their children to be successful and to have opportunities. They want to be treated with respect. They wanted to be included in the greater society. I think there are legitimate concerns around safety and national security, and we'll work on those things together. And I have been part of that business for a very long time. I have great confidence and great relationships with the people in doing that. But I'll tell you, one of the things I've learned, I've done town halls, thousands of them across my city, and I've gone into every neighborhood, and I've spoken to the people in every community. And when we talk, people are interested in the big issues of the day, the headlines, the stuff that you're going to see on the CBC National. But when we talk about what really is important in their lives, they talk about what's going on in their community. They talk about job opportunities for their kids, decent housing, decent transportation. They're worried about somebody driving too fast through their neighborhood. They're worried about the quality of life issues that most affect them. And those are the things that we all have to pay attention to. And I've always gone into those communities and known that I needed to help those citizens, not just with the big issues of national security and a threat of overseas terrorism, even big issues like the budget and economy, which are critically important to the country. But in a neighborhood, you got to take care of neighborhood things. I've always felt I was a neighborhood guy. I've worked in neighborhoods my whole life, and some of the best people I know are other neighborhood guys, and we all worked on these things together to improve the quality of people's lives. And, yes, I want to be a federal politician, and I want to be a neighborhood guy.
We got to leave it there, but I want to thank you very much for coming in to speak with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Bill Blair joining me here in our Toronto studio.